Have you ever wondered what it would be like in RimWorld to survive for 100 days as the god of war himself, Kratos? Me as well, except I'm not Kratos, I'm just a YouTuber who pretends to be a medieval warrior rat. Regardless though, let us begin our journey. Are you ready? Boy. Sorry, I just thought I'd go ahead and get that out of the way. You can't play as Kratos and not go, boy, at least once, just one little time. Now, there is an extra component to this that I would like to mention. Of course, we are going to be playing 100 days as Kratos, but every 25 days, we're going to have something of a boss battle. So we're going to be fighting the sons of Thor, and then Odin. Every 25 days, we will have essentially a boss battle. It may also be worth mentioning that my extent of knowledge with God of War only goes up until the one from 2018. I haven't finished Ragnarok yet, I'm not even a quarter of the way through, so there's that. But nonetheless, let us begin our journey. One of the very first things we did was have Kratos take Atreus out on a hunt for a megasloth, as it was one of the most powerful creatures in the area, and we had to begin his training somewhere. And believe you me, we do need to train, because Odin is coming sooner rather than later, and we need to be ready. Atreus and Kratos managed to take down the megasloth fairly easily, and we wouldn't let it go to waste. It wasn't just for target practice, we had planned on eating it, as we hadn't brought any food along with us. Kratos began cooking up some nice megasloth steaks on the campfire. Just before later in the evening, he and Atreus went to a local rune site and began deconstructing everything for resources such as iron, steel, stone blocks, etc, etc. Jesus Christ, did you just hear how I tried to say the word etc? Oh my god, you'll have to forgive me. It's very early in the morning and I've had 3 cups of coffee with no water. I'm dehydrated and I'm trying my best. But regardless of the fact of my inevitable death of dehydration, the first night our heroes slept nice, warm and cozy next to their burning campfire. Now we may have a warm campfire, but that wouldn't always sustain our bodies, right? We need shelter, we need somewhere to live. So those ancient ruins we had been deconstructing on before, we decided to kind of set those up as a temporary cabin of sorts until we have better means. And realistically, it's not because we'll die out in the cold. These two are gods, essentially. They would be completely fine out there in the wintertime, but it wouldn't be very comfortable, and if anyone else decides to join us, they would probably die. After a bit of time and a bit of work later, we had our very first visitors stop in. They were from a noble house and they were an archer looking to trade. Unfortunately, they didn't have anything interesting for us to buy. However, they did end up gifting us some medicine before leaving, which was very kind of them, even though we don't need it because, once again, we're gods. Although I suppose if we do get injured, it might be good for the healing process. Maybe it'll make it go faster. Regardless though, we had our very first event. It was a mad snow hare. Of course, we easily took care of this vicious little creature. Atreus even managed to kill it on his own with his bow and arrow. Is it possible that this snow hare was sent by Odin as a test? Probably not, it's probably just a mad snow hare, but you never know. During this time, Atreus was also working on a bit of a food storage room for us. It would have a vent in one of the walls leading to the outside. That way when it gets cold, and here in the boreal forest it's normally extremely cold, it would actually freeze our food or refrigerate it and keep it, good for longer essentially. Which would also be crucial for us surviving the winter. Although we are gods, if there's no food around, we could begin starving, unfortunately. And as of right now, sure, we can hunt plenty of elk, but when it gets very, very cold and there's no elk to be had, we would be screwed. And speaking of screwed, we had our very first raid come shortly after the hunting of elk, and this raider would be screwed, as they had no idea they were tackling the god of war and his son. Kratos used his phase strike ability and easily subdued the raider. Kratos, of course, angered by the fact that this raider tried to attack him and his son, had planned on killing her, but Atreus came and uttered those very special words to him once again.
He's beaten, Father. Not a threat.
And since Atreus had pleaded for the raiders' life and that they were beaten and not a threat, maybe now that they were not a threat, they could be our allies. So we built a nice little prison to stuff them in and to try to convert them to our side. Now, it was by this point that Kratos realized what most of us poor children who went camping on vacation with our parents when we were younger realized as well, that sleeping on the ground really sucks ass. So he took 2 logs with his big godly hands and karate chopped them into beds, one for Atreus and one for himself. and boy were they comfortable. Not too long after that though, we received our second raid of the video. I felt bad for this raider. No, I truly did feel bad for them because I'm not sure what's going wrong inside their head. They thought that they could kill the literal god of war, but unfortunately for them, before I could ask them any questions, Kratos quickly sliced off their head. As one does. Some time later, Atreus was building us some nice wooden food baskets. That way we could store all of our food in those instead of having them lie on the ground getting dirty with, well, dirt and twigs and wood and things like that. He also began working on a storage building as well for us. It was quite small, but it would be good to store some of the weapons and armor we get from raids as well as some raw resources like steel. And speaking of raw resources, Kratos finally began harvesting our very first yield of rice. And this would be perfect because we could stuff this in our food baskets and we would possibly be able to survive winter with this, as well as hunting some animals like elk and whatnot ahead of time. Sometime later, Kratos, his bulging muscles, and his massive Leviathan axe somehow convinced the raider Tona to join us. Not really sure how that happened, but she's part of the family now. And for the next little bit, of course, we began making our living quarters a bit more acceptable by putting down some nice wooden floors. That way the place is pretty beautiful looking. And Atreus also built the game of I believe, as it were. That way everyone doesn't get too bored. Get it? Because it's a game? A board game. Oh yeah, and we also constructed some very nice drying and tanning racks. That way we could begin some leather production from all the animals that we were killing. We had plenty of hides just laying around. We could use all the leather for clothes or rugs or really whatever our little hearts desired. But my friends, finally we were upon it. Day 25 was here. Lightning struck the earth ferociously. We were about to fight a god. The lightning crashed and struck the ground so hard, and from the lightning emerged Modi, son of Thor. Modi here, of course, was the weaker of the two sons of Thor, but that did not mean that he was any less dangerous to us at this point. We would still need to keep our wits about us, for Modi here was not just a melee fighter, no, being the son of Thor, he had lightning power. He began actually creating electricity around the battlefield and injuring Kratos and Tona. Luckily, they were able to escape the electric on the battlefield, and Kratos even managed to get a phase strike in on Modi. And this would seal his fate. Modi, caught off guard, was killed by Kratos. With the battle over, there was but one way to ensure that Modi was dead and would stay dead. We must rip his skull from his body. With his skull now removed from his body, Kratos cradled it all the way back home, where he would then put it on a skull spike made out of the bones of the animals we'd been hunting, because Modi was just that. Our prey. Oh, that was a good line, Rat Knight. Thank you, dear viewer. I really appreciate that. Atreus was then building a beautiful snowman out in the beautiful snowy snow. Sometime later, he took the time out of his very busy schedule of building gorgeous snowmen to help his father with a cabin for them all to stay in. Somewhere nice and warm and cozy where they could relax and kick their feet up in between all the Norse gods trying to murder them. And I must say, after it was all said and done and built, it did look very nice and cozy. Then I spotted Tona praying, not sure what god or goddess she was praying to, but I found it very ironic seeing how the literal god of war was her friend now. But to each their own. As long as it wasn't Odin or Thor or any of the gods and or goddesses that are trying to kill us, we really didn't mind. Late in the evening though, they all three sat around and had dinner together at their nice little table. Speaking of dinner, we ended up having a mega sloth self-tame, but I got a spoiler for you, we can't afford to feed it. Thus, unfortunately, the mega sloth itself must become the food, so Kratos happily obliged. Now you can eat a mega sloth, but you know what you can't eat? Impids, fire-breathing impids who are just so bloodthirsty and dying to kill you, your son, and your new raider friend. Oh look! There's some now. The Impid Tribes people decided to go ahead and plan out their raid before they decided to, well, attempt it, which was good for them because that would mean that they would have a few more hours left to live. Because once Kratos catches wind of this, he is going to plant the Leviathan axe firmly between their little sticky horns, to which he did. Several times, I might add, with 2 of the 3 raiders dying and the third being a coward who decided to flee. But let the fool run. Let him run back to his tribe of filthy, inbred impids. Maybe he would tell them what he saw here today, and it would deter them from further advances. Now, after slaughtering the impids, Kratos had a bright idea. He thought to himself, you know, these logs I sliced in half with a karate chopper? Great and all, but maybe we have some nice, comfortable fur beds instead. So, thus he began building some. After some time passed, late one evening, we had a massive dire wolf who was hunting Atreus for food. This would be the perfect test for Atreus to prove himself and his training to continue, essentially. So of course he began using his newly acquired fire bow, which I thought would be cool because in the games he has those magical arrows, but he was pretty dog shit with his aim with the fire bow, and it had some pretty low damage even if he managed to hit the wolf. But it was okay, he was young and Daddy had saved his life once again, no shame in that. It would take time, but young Atreus would finally grow and adapt to the environment. He would get better, essentially, is what I'm getting at, because, you know, if he doesn't, we're all going to die by the time that Odin gets here, or possibly even before that. And while we're on the topic of death, we ended up having another group of Impid raiders. Now, these raiders were some type of knights coming from the Impid tribe, most likely very upset about Kratos slaughtering their brethren. One of them gathered up magical power and threw a fireball directly in hit Atreus. Luckily, he would be okay, but he was injured. Enraged by Atreus being injured was Kratos, who used his phase strike to kill one and then began attempting to, well, I suppose, presumably cut off the head of the other Impid. To which he eventually did. Actually, I believe I was wrong. He did not kill the first one, I remember now, because they're still alive, and he stripped them of their armor. This armor would be perfect for Atreus, who was currently burnt just a tiny bit. He was a little crispy, but after he got to feeling better, this armor would be perfect. Now, what makes this armor so great? It was made of demon scale, which is very resistant to fire, and fire-like attacks such as electricity, which we all know is what Thor and Odin and all those fools use. We also allowed Atreus to dual-wield crossbows that he got from the Impids. Now, this isn't exactly true to the games, but look, baby, I came to play to win. You know what I mean? I'm going to kill Odin. Okay, I might be getting a little ahead of myself here. I just want to survive. We don't have to try to conquer all the Norse gods. We just need to survive them. Through the night of day 49 up until the morning of day 50, we worked on some beautiful floors in our cabin, and might I just say they look very extravagant. But day 50, I hear you say, uh-oh, time for another boss battle. This time, the same as it was on day 25, the lightning struck the planet viciously with a crackle and a pop. Only this lightning was much more powerful. Out of the smoke arose Magni, son of Thor. Magni, of course, was much stronger than his little baby brother Modi. He too, though, was highly trained and highly skilled in the power of lightning and electricity. He also donned some very powerful armor as well as a very powerful greatsword. But even as he trotted towards us, Kratos was still none too impressed by Magni. He began charging at our three warriors, and Kratos began charging back at him. The two engaged in combat, and thanks to Tona and Atreus, luckily we were able to defeat him. And thankfully he wasn't dead, that way we could strip him of his possessions, such as his fabulous armor. Which would be extremely helpful because up until this point Kratos has had nothing on but a pair of pants, and some gauntlets and boots of course, but no chest armor, so he's basically been shirtless. This armor would be perfect for him because it would make him even more unstoppable. Oh yeah, and it might be worth mentioning as well that we removed Magni's skull from his body, same as we did with Modi, and we added it onto our collection. Ah, the sons of Thor reunited at last. Quite a bit of time had passed, and then around day 58, we have received word of an item stash nearby. Kratos thought this the perfect moment to take Atreus out, so he decided to go. A bit of adventure would be good for the boy. It would help him grow as a person and help him build character, and better yet, it would help him build his skills for the inevitable moment when we do have to face Odin. Assuming that we make it past Thor, of course. It took quite a while, seeing how both of our heroes here were on foot, but by day 60 we finally had made it to the item stash. Kratos, of course, as any rational father, or just person in general, warned Atreus that there could be dangers ahead. Atreus, being the young spunky lad that he is, of course, didn't pay attention to this and began running towards the item stash, excited. In doing so, we quickly realized this was an ambush set up by an Impid Death Knight who Kratos quickly took down. Kratos also pursued the other who was attempting to flee and easily murdered him. Upon arriving back at the item stash, we found a much better version of the Leviathan axe. Kratos quickly equipped it along with the one he currently has. After opening up the item stash, the only thing that was interesting in there was a set of legendary plate armor, which was better than the godly armor Kratos currently had on, so he equipped it of course, making him even more powerful. So with his new armor and new axe, the two of them returned home. But I hear you say, but Rat Dog, there's only one Leviathan axe. Well, look, listen. It's just a game, okay? Calm down, easy. Are you calm now? Okay, good. Let's continue. Sometime later, by day 68, we had this massive snake creature called a lindworm, which according to Google is apparently some type of mythical dragon-like creature from Europe. I don't really give a shit. I thought it the perfect creature for Kratos to kill since it's mythical and godlike. I did start kind of feeling bad for it though, because when we attacked it, it tried to run away from us, but unfortunately we had already injured it, and really the only thing to do here is to put it out of its misery, so Kratos happily obliged it. But that would be okay, we wouldn't let it go to waste. First of all, the training for Kratos to fight this creature when it did finally turn around and attack him was pretty good, it's good practice. And also we're going to skin it and eat it, so that's a plus. Killing this large mystical creature also gave me an idea to kill some more large mystical creatures. There are creatures in this area called Roxas, which are these massive sheep beast-looking creatures, so we hunted some of them as well. I'm not just trying to be cruel to these mystical beauties of the area. This is for good target practice, this is for food, and the training that we've mentioned for Atreus several times as well. Now day 75 finally rolled around, and you know what that means. It's time for another boss battle. Who could it be this time? Well, this massive lightning storm should hopefully give you an indicator. That's right, it's finally time we fight the fat, hammer-wielding oaf himself, Thor, the god of thunder. His entrance was extremely interesting and flashy. With every single step he took, it would seem lightning struck nearby. Unfortunately, as I was getting Kratos ready for the battle, lightning struck Atreus from nearby and Thor rushed in to try and kidnap him. Lucky for us, however, Thor, being a god, he was very fast. Except he was a fat god, so he was a bit slower than our god of war. Kratos began running off after him. As the rain poured down from the sky, Kratos finally caught up with Thor, striking him several times, and then he was finally able to knock him to the ground, and it would appear that he was dead. Kratos, of course, was much more concerned with the safety and well-being of his son, so of course he rushed Atreus back home while Thor's body lay there. As Thor's body just lay there in the freezing cold rain, I couldn't help but think to myself, we were so lucky because this god was so strong and... Wait a minute. Where did he go? With a crack of lightning and the sound of a pop, Thor and his hammer somehow disappeared into thin air. As Tona was walking back home to discuss with Kratos, she was then ambushed by him. Thor was enraged that Tona was wielding the weapons that his son Modi had carried before, and then he beat her to the ground. Unfortunately, as she lay on the ground, she was then struck by Thor's lightning, which unfortunately charged all throughout her entire body until coming out of her eye socket, killing her. Kratos rushed back outside, not realizing Thor was still alive, and then the lightning struck and he was ambushed. Luckily though, he saw an opening and dug his Leviathan axes into Thor's gullet, dropping him to the ground. This time he would not let Thor escape. Kratos ripped Thor's disgusting skull from his body. Ah, the perfect addition for our collection. We'll add it right next to his sons. You know, when you say that kind of stuff out loud, it sounds awful, but, Thor and his sons and whatnot, they're really bad gods, so I don't feel that bad, that Kratos slaughtered them. Unfortunately, though, Kratos had the great honor and great displeasure of carrying his new friend Tona to her final resting place. She truly did die an honorable death, though not many mortals can say they held their own against a god, even though she did die. Some time had passed, and by day 80 we had a massive Impid raid. They're coming to try and murder us and burn down our home, but luckily we had a trade caravan who was more than happy to assist us. The battle that ensued was actually very beautiful, a spectacular show of lights and powers, as both sides were actually very gifted with magic. Of course, though, this didn't scare Kratos off. He was right there in the thick of it with both of his axes swinging like a madman, killing impids left and right as the fire burned through the woods. Some time later, after hours of magic powers and bloodshed had finally passed, the impids were fleeing. We had finally done it. Kratos and the trade caravan had defeated them. Now, of course, the only thing left for us to do was for Kratos and Atreus to begin stomping out all the fires that the impids had started, that way our home doesn't burn to the ground. Now, with that being said, there was an impid who was injured on one of our bone spike traps by the name of Vivaz, who seemed like they would be pretty useful. Maybe we could try to convince them to join us and they could assist us in our battle against the gods. Of course, we are creeping up on day 100, and Odin is sure to be here on that day. We would need all the help that we could get. Luckily, we also ended up getting sensory mechanites. I know that sounds horrible, but our two godlike heroes could take the pain, and this would increase their senses, moving, manipulation, etc. Throughout the next few days, Kratos would put a very heavy focus on trying to get Vivaz to join us. Her impid fire breath and just physical melee capabilities and whatnot would be so very useful against Odin. But just as well as trying to recruit Vivaz to help us out, we would also still need to be training Atreus. Atreus was actually being hunted by a bear, which we found to be the perfect opportunity to try and train him a little bit. In my personal opinion, nothing helps a dear child learn more than a big, bloodthirsty grizzly bear trying to attack them, eat them, and then turn them into bear shit somewhere in the woods. Atreus did manage to hold his own fairly well, even though Kratos really carried all the weight during the fight with the bear. By day 94, we finally convinced Vivaz to join us in our conquest against the Norse gods. This would help us quite a bit, even just the smallest bit of manpower. We didn't have a lot of equipment for her, unfortunately, but we would have to make do. Atreus and Kratos rest their weary heads at night in their nice soft fur beds, just trying to relax, because for the next few days we'd be doing so much training and hunting and just everything to try and prepare for this battle as best we could. A few days later, day 100 finally rolled around, and so did the lightning storm. We had seen it so many times before, but it was nothing like this. We waited in our great dining hall upon Odin's arrival, and then just like that, lightning struck in the middle of the dining hall, and he appeared. Brandishing a massive spear with unknown potential and power, he quickly began running through our heroes. Kratos and Atreus were shocked by lightning and thus unable to stop Odin from hand-to-hand combat with Vivaz. The Allfather quickly defeated Vivaz and began making his way to Atreus. With a lightning bolt he struck him and knocked him down. The Allfather attempted to go outside where there would be more room for a great battle between he and Kratos, but Kratos ran up from behind with his axes and attempted to attack him. Then the two began in close quarters combat. The two gods hit each other so hard the shockwaves could be heard and felt for miles all around. But unfortunately, with one swift jab from Odin's mighty spear, Kratos was defeated. Kratos lay next to his son as the nice dining hall and really the town that they were building together began burning down around them, the ashes, the boards all falling on their faces. Somehow, though, Atreus gathered up the last bit of strength that he had to drag his father out of the building, and the two of them began to escape to safety. Fortunately for the both of them, Odin was none the wiser. He was much too concerned with burning down this beautiful home that the two of them had built. He thought that he was going to burn it down on top of them, killing both of them, but luckily they did escape. But, my friends, that is how I survived for 100 days in RimWorld as the God of War himself. I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope to see you all very soon in the next video and or episode or series. But once again, thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.